taking a look at the P-51D Mustang in DCS World. I am in VR right now. I'm using one touch controller and the X56R HOTAS. The main reason why you should be using a HOTAS like this is to get the split throttle for your RPMs and your throttle. It's going to be a little hard if you have a single throttle HOTAS, but you can use something, say, like the T-Flight X by binding your RPMs to two of the buttons. That will work. I have done that before. I have the pedals at my feet as well with the toe brakes, and I guess we will start by something very simple, turning on the parking brake. You're going to want to apply toe brakes, pull the parking brake, release toe brakes. So with that set, we now can start configuring the plane for taking off. And this is a good plane to start out with in DCS in that you have the trainer version freely available when you download the game. And it's really going to set you up with the basics as opposed to one of the jets. Some of the stuff that you could learn in a jet is not going to apply to one of these smaller prop planes, whereas most of what you're going to deal with here can be easily applied everywhere else. The first thing you should do is get yourself a checklist. It's always good to fly with a checklist. So let me turn the body off here. First thing we're going to do is set the flaps. I have those set to a switch on the throttle. We'll go full flaps up. They will not activate immediately as they are hydraulic driven, and we need to be driving power to the hydraulics with the engine, which is not on. Second is carburetor ram air, always on. That is going to be that switch, that lever there. We will push it all the way up. And I generally have never seen a time where that should ever be changed. Third will be the rudder and elevator trim. I have those set to some axes on the throttle, so I will set the rudder to about 6 is what it tells you here. Some people say 5. I go just slightly over 5. That'll do you good. The elevator trim should be just under your first notch there, which I believe is 5 or 3. It's hard to see in VR. It's a little blurry. But basically you have some indicators where you're at. You want to be just under the first one above 0. 0 is going to be that third one from the right. So just right about there. That'll get you good. What that's going to do is force the plane to stay tail wheel down on takeoff, because you want to, basically on takeoff, we're going to want to let the wings get a little bit of air underneath them and start getting airborne before we actually take off from the ground, which you will see here in a minute. Next, we have the RPM lever, max, right there. Turn my body back on. We want the throttle 1 inch open, right about there. Fuel booster, always on. That is going to be that guy right there. This is going to be your fuel and engine area right there. Magnetos. These guys here, your ignition, on. Parking brake is already on. We are good there. Fuel shut off right here. Currently it is off. We want our fuel on. We are now providing fuel into the lines. Our tank we have set to left. You want to always start with left and use a bit of your left fuel because of the carburetor overflow. If you have any fuel in the center tank, once you can switch, it's best to use up the center fuel because of the weight that it puts aftward. You want to get rid of all of that weight so that you can actually gain some nose to tail maneuverability there. Fuel quantity. Let's go ahead and just give that a look there. Our gauges for the fuel are going to be right here for the left wing, right here for the right wing, and behind us here we have the fuselage tank, which has nothing in it at the moment. So we are good there. Next, we have the oxygen diluter. We don't need to worry about that. Oh, there's that stupid Su-25. He's going to be loud here in a second. Okay, so oxygen. Good. Okay, so what we're going to do here, this is going to be the battery panel here. It's got the, as you can see, generator, battery, gun heat, veto heat. All of those should come on. You can pretty much start with those if you want to start using radios immediately. So those can all come on. So now we're draining battery, and I might as well just make the call in to request startup. So we're going to talk to the ATC and request startup.
Infield 1-1, request startup. Infield 1-1, Vazani, cleared for startup, wind 298 at 2 meters per second.
Oh, wind picked up. Okay, it used to be 1 at 118. It has changed. Good to know. That's still not going to really affect us on takeoff. So, now we have all those on. We can prime the engine. It says here on the checklist for 4 seconds. I've always just done about 3, which seems to work fine in sim. So we'll go 1, 2, 3. We are primed. Oil dilute. It says here for 10 seconds. I've never actually used that in the sim. It doesn't seem to need it, but if you really want to, you can mess with your oil dilution. So we are then going to clear prop and start the engine. We'll flip to run, which is there. We have the emergency full, and run, I just switched it from idle, and I have that on a switch on my throttle, just because you need to interact with that while you're using the starter. So we're now started. We are now at the phase where we want to warm up the engine, so we want to get the carb temp in the green, and we want to get the coolant temp at around 60. And we want to do that at around 1,000 RPM, so we'll take down the RPMs. Okay, and that needed a little bit less throttle there. Go back to full RPM, and there we go. Okay, so that should be good for warming up. We can close the starter cover. We can uncage our artificial horizon there, and it'll tell you to close the canopy, but you really don't need to until you are taking off, because it's kind of nice to just lean out as you're taxiing to see what's going on in front of the nose, seeing as how it's so high. We've already turned on the gun and pitot heat. We have already set the radio by talking to Vazani here. Next, we are going to, if you really want to, you can turn on the gyros there, so that if you flip on the guns, you will have all of that preset. Just see what that looks like here. There we go. We have both there. This is going to be fixed gun sight. This is good for attacking ground targets. The gyro only is good for attacking air targets, and I will usually, if I'm attacking ground targets, I will have the gyro and the fixed sight on. So that is good there. We will put the gun back to safe. Okay, we should be good to taxi here. So we are going to taxi to, what runway is that over there? Let me get out of that menu here. We're going to taxi to runway 13. Let's go ahead and tell tower that.
Enfield 1-1. Request taxi to runway.
Enfield 1-1. Vazani, clear to taxi to runway 13.
Okay, so we are clear to taxi. As you can see, the flaps have come up since the engine is on, and we already set them at the beginning. One of the reasons I'm kind of making this video here is because it took me a lot of sort of searching and picking and choosing different video tutorials for this, because some weren't covering something, some were getting things wrong, one of which was in taxiing. A lot of people don't understand how the tail wheel lock works in this. You don't want to be heavy on the brakes in the P-51. They are very fragile. They will burn out almost immediately. You really want to be, oh, there's that stupid Sue. He's gonna be loud. Let's get away from him. So let's start taxiing here. So as we're moving here, you can see that the tail wheel does not move too much. We're not getting a lot of rotation out of that. So what you can do is push forward on the stick and apply a small amount of braking, and that will unlock the tail wheel, the pushing forward on the stick. And so that's going to allow some higher angle turns here. See there? And as you can see, it actually sort of kept going there because it became completely unlocked. And you need to bring it back in line and lock it by holding back on the stick. That will lock it. So forward to unlock the tail wheel, back to lock it. That is an important feature in the P-51 for ground maneuvering. So we'll look out the sides here and see that we are moving in the direction we want. We are all good there. And we're now at 1-3.
Enfield 1-1. Vazani, you are cleared for takeoff when ready. Climb 300 at QFE 28.10.
Okay, and once you get lined up with your center line here, you want to give a little bit more forward directionality to straighten out your tail wheel so that you don't have that in a direction you don't want. And we will, now that we're all a little bit heavy on the brakes there, don't want to do that, we'll close the canopy. You don't want to take off with the canopy open. If you achieve too high speeds, I have seen it get ripped off a couple times when I forgot to close it, and that's no good. So what we're going to do is we are going to toe brake. We are going to make sure that the RPMs are full. We are going to increase the power to, we actually have your engine limitations over here. Those are going to tell you what your RPMs and manifold pressures should be for different stages of flight. And we can see here, takeoff, 61 manifold pressure, 3000 RPM. So that is basically going to be full throttle, full RPM. So we're going to make sure that we get the RPMs up to 30 before releasing the toe brakes. We are going to hold back on the stick to lock the tail wheel, and we're actually going to give a little bit of right aileron just to counteract some of the left turning tendencies that the engine is going to be putting on the aircraft. We have already set the trim to counteract some of that, and when we get to around 100 miles an hour on the ground, we're going to start relieving some of that back pressure so that the plane can start rolling on the front landing gear and get a little bit of wind under the wings before we actually try to pull off the ground. That is going to help it get airborne without many problems. So let's get airborne here. Right rudder as always. Sooner than I was expecting there, but that's fine as long as we get off the ground. So let's get all trimmed here. So pitch power trim. We'll set our pitch to where we want. We will adjust power to where we want, and then we will trim to hold. So if you want to get to a cruise configuration, that is going to be 24 RPM and around 36 manifold pressure. So your simple green arcs there, that's your cruise. So we have a slip indicator right there that is telling us that our tail is sort of slipping to the right. What you want to do with that in all planes is step on the ball. So we will apply a little bit of right rudder. And that's the basics of coordinating your turns. If you are turning at all, you want to keep the ball centered, and that is going to ensure that your plane is flying correctly with the velocity vector you're creating. The reason people have problems with the P-51 sim is not respecting the engine. It's very temperamental and can be destroyed on the ground by not performing steps at the right time, or in an incorrect order, or by exceeding certain operational limits in the sky. So the checklist is important, and so is the engine limitations guide. If you stay within those limits, you'll be fine. You can't be running this thing at takeoff power more than about a minute at a time, and your emergency power will really only last you about 15 minutes at most. So there we've got the strip there. We can start bringing our power down. We're a little bit high. We probably want to be at around 1,000 feet here. Let's go ahead and call in an inbound.
Infield 1-1, inbound.
Infield 1-1. Rosani, fly heading 301, 412, QFE 28.10, runway 13.
Infield 1-1, request landing.
And so pitch power trim, every time you adjust your power settings, you're going to need to adjust for trim because of the way that the rotor is, the propeller rather, is affecting the aircraft and torquing it. So the trim helps with that. Why is my flaps, that's fine, you know what, I didn't set my flaps there, but that was right about when I wanted to. I must have some key binding interference happening with that. But right about now is when we would start wanting to go to 10 degrees of flaps, so that's good. Nope, need a little bit more throttle there, starting to hear the engine. Let's keep the nose coming down, losing altitude when we get that on our 45 here. We can turn base, so we can start doing that about now. Step on the ball, coordinate the turns. Oh yeah, there is definitely a key binding issue happening. Probably my yoke. I still have that plugged in. Okay. So we are now on base for 1-3. We want to be touching down in the Mustang at around 90 to 100 miles per hour. That's when we want our wheels to be making contact with the runway here. A higher speed than that can cause you to balloon, which is basically bouncing, which is not good and could result in a go-around. So let's see if we can get this clean on the first try. We will start turning final here about now. Okay, and we are on final approach. Pisani 1-3.
Enfield 1-1. Pisani, check landing gear. Wind 298 at 2 meters.
Landing gear down.
Runway 13.
Let's go full flaps. Once we know we're going to make the runway, we can go idle. And we're going to make it. Let's start rounding out into the flare. Let's hold it here, hold it here. Still too fast. Still too fast. Flaring. Perfect. Perfect, perfect. And we want to go back pressure to lock the tail wheel. Aerodynamic braking. Let's not kill the engine. And if we need to, we can start applying brake pressure. But we should be good. We should be good there. We'll open up the canopy so we can see where we're going. And we'll get off on this next taxiway here.
Enfield 1-1. Taxi to parking area.
Okay, and we are clear of active. We can reset the flaps. Adjust throttle for RPM, and now we can throttle back to the ramp. And that's pretty much the basics of flight in the P-51 here. It's how you get up and get back down, keep in the air. If anyone actually views this and wants to go into gunnery at some point, I'm not the best in this, especially with unguided bombs, but the 6 Brownings are quite easy to use. The basics for that are really just going to be air-to-air, get behind the aircraft you want to shoot at, and on the ground would be to use the fixed gun sight and start from a trailing lead on your target and work to a side, so you kind of strafe them a little bit as you're going to make sure you get rounds on target. Yeah, that is going to cover it here for the P-51D, and hope that helped.